We'd like to thank our sponsors, Hack and Rose, Attorneys at Law, New York City. New Pathway Counseling Services, Pinebrook, New Jersey. Warren Sand Company, Springfield, Illinois. Shook Funeral Home, Clifton, New Jersey. MedScreen Laboratories, Clifton, New Jersey. Standard Tile of East Hanover. Hayek's Hometown Market in Newton, New Jersey. And thanks to the many other sponsors listed here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Kosh of Greater Good Media, LLC, and welcome to tonight's episode of Breaking the Silence. This is our fourth episode, and we hope you find tonight's episode to be valuable in its content. Clark will have with him tonight Lisa Kaufman of Play and Grow Physical Therapy, Ardsley, New York. What Lisa has to contribute here, I believe, is of great importance in keeping our children safe, especially when it speaks to their mental health. So that said, I would like to remind everyone, if you have the wherewithal to do so, to please make a donation or come on as a sponsor. You can go to www.greatergoodmediallc.com, clarkfredericks.com, or cliftonkiwanis.org. We want to thank Clifton Kiwanis for allowing us to bring this presentation to you this evening. Now I'm going to turn it over to Clark, and thanks again.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of Breaking the Silence. Our first episode, we covered grooming. Our second episode, we covered if the unthinkable has happened and your child has been molested. We had people from Ginny's house on and a psychologist who treats abused children on how they get the victims to open up. And in our third episode, we covered substance abuse in our children and in adults. And one thing I took away from that episode, which relates to this episode, is that our speaker, Kim Vitale, said 100%, not 50%, 75, 90. She said all of the people she treats have unresolved childhood trauma that has led to their addiction. And I found that fascinating. That's what I had as well, which led to my addiction. I was molested and eventually raped by my Boy Scout leader from age 7 to 12. He was a lieutenant in the local sheriff's department. I thought he was untouchable. Back when I was a child, there were no agencies to go to. The only people to go to was law enforcement, and he was a member of law enforcement. And I felt there was no one I could trust or turn to. I lived in silence, and the silence destroyed my life. It led me down one dead-end street after another, led me into various addictions. And after I encountered my abuser in a deli 30 plus years after my attack, he had another young boy about the age he raped me at by his side. And that young boy was calling him the same nickname he used to insist I call him. My life completely crumbled that day. I fell into addiction. I fell into despair. And one night I drove to his house to confront him. A violent struggle ensued and I stabbed him to death. I faced life in prison, and I was blessed by God and by the court system to only receive a 5-year sentence. I became an advocate for the changing of the statute of limitations law in New Jersey, and myself and all the other advocates saw the passing of a new law. We went from one of the worst laws in the country to the strongest law here in New Jersey. Since then, I've dedicated my life to helping victims, to educating people. And that's why I'm doing this 5-part series to shine light on a dark topic that few people like to talk about. I'm willing to put myself out there, put my pain out there, put my shame out there, so that it'll free up the next person to want to speak about it. In this week's episode, we're going to go in a slightly different direction, but a direction which I am thrilled to cover: pediatric physical therapy. And the Kiwanis Club that we are doing this as a fundraiser for, their mission is improving the lives of children in their community, one life at a time. And nobody does that more than a pediatric physical therapist. And this is a field I don't know that much about. I'm ready to learn, and I hope you'll learn with me. I'm honored to have as my guest Lisa Kaufman from Play and Grow Physical Therapy. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Clark. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is going to be great. I am thrilled to have you. I'm thrilled to. I always want to keep learning in life, and you're going to help me learn today. And hopefully, everybody who's viewing will learn something. So, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
In our pre-interview, you discussed how healing a child as early as possible is important in your field, as it is for someone like me who had childhood sexual abuse.
Absolutely.
For an example, how early can you begin treating children, or how early have you specifically in your practice began treating children?
So we have the youngest that we've treated are babies that come in, they're infants, they're 6 to 7 weeks old. And we've treated those babies for orthopedic problems.
Wow, it's amazing. That early you can get going, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can, I mean, almost immediately upon their birth, you can tell if there's something wrong?
This specific orthopedic problem can be picked up very, very early. I would say some pediatricians are better at diagnosing it earlier than others, but the ones that are very on top of it, they can see it very, very young.
I mean, what you do is non-invasive, right? So that's how you can begin treating, right?
Absolutely. And it's really important to start when the baby is young. The muscles are still developing, they're soft. You can create a lot of change. You can educate the parents on what to do on a daily basis, and make a lot of.
Sorry for interrupting you. Is there a stigma along, like there's a stigma with childhood sexual abuse. There's a stigma with addictions, and it just leads people to isolate themselves. Is there a stigma with I assume there is with parents and the children that are born with a disorder?
Yeah, I think every parent wants to believe that their child is absolutely perfect and there's no problems. And I think addressing those problems is admitting that there's something going on. But the quicker that you can come to terms with that, the quicker you can get treatment. It doesn't have to be an ongoing problem. It can be fixed. Right. When it's ignored, that it doesn't get better and it only gets worse.
And I would think if you would ignore one issue, one problem, the longer it goes on, it'll create other problems in the child with their not only physical development, but their emotional, psychological development also, I would think, right?
Absolutely. Very, very true.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. One of the areas you treat children is something I never put 2 and 2 together that would happen, and that is with children on the spectrum, children with autism, ADHD.
Right.
I didn't honestly think that was something a physical therapist handled. I know you have therapists that specialize in that. Right. What can a physical therapist do for children with that disorder? How do you treat? What do you do?
So typically it really used to be the realm of the occupational therapist that would really address children who had spectrum disorders. But we have a physical therapist on staff who's been training for the last 10 years, just specifically in treatment of children with spectrum disorders. And what she does when they come in is she does a thorough evaluation of all of their sensory systems. So she'll look at the vestibular system, which is the motor balance system. She'll look at their motor system, their visual system, their auditory system, which is how they interact with sound, and their regulatory system, which sometimes can be off-skewed. And when she does her full evaluation, she'll look to see what the findings are, and her treatment approach is going to be based on where the child has weaknesses. She'll look at strengths and she'll look at weaknesses. And
so you could have 5 children on the spectrum, say with autism, and each of those 5 could have different needs or that they need help with, right?
Absolutely. We don't treat each child by their diagnosis. We treat them how they present when we evaluate them. You
said a term to me, which I jotted down, which I loved. You said, we treat the symptom, not the diagnosis.
Exactly. So we treat what we find. And that really is across the board with whatever we treat, whether it's a child on the spectrum or a child with an orthopedic problem or a neurological problem. We do our full assessment. We see where the area of need is, and then that's what we address. That's how we come up with our treatment plan.
Great. I back when I grew up, you always had that kid in the back of the classroom, who just couldn't sit still, who just tormented the teacher, who any little butterfly outside the window that floated by, he was distracted by it.
Yeah.
Let's call him little Johnny, let's say. Little Johnny with ADHD.
Right.
I don't know. Back then, we never treated children with drugs with that disorder.
Right.
I know that's sort of common now. I love that you, as a physical therapist, can treat this disorder, and maybe the child will never need drugs, or maybe they'll just need a lesser amount of it with what you are able to do.
Yeah, I'm a believer in trying to fix the problem without medication.
Right.
Some children need to have both.
Right.
Certainly, I think a first approach should be to just see if there's a natural way to address the focus and the attention. And that's what we try to do. We try to focus on helping the child without medication first.
Right. So many people that have been sexually abused, like myself, reach out, and they're on antidepressants.
Right.
And when I was incarcerated, the jail had me on every antidepressant you can imagine, because they figured, I have to be depressed with what happened to me. And I would much rather see a person try techniques to avoid the drugs. But I understand certain circumstances call for a drug use, but that's why I agree with you. If you can get results without having to turn to Ritalin or Adderall, that's fantastic. And that's what you try to do, right? Avoid that.
Right. So the children who have an ADHD, it's a regulation problem. So they might come in and they might have like an incredible amount of energy. We call it a high arousal state. So in order to get them to even participate in physical therapy, we have to figure out a way to bring them down, right? So we tap into different resources. One of the resources that we use, that I've used also with some of the children that I work with, is I will put something called a metronome in the background.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I had to Google it to look up what it was. I wasn't familiar with it, and I find that fascinating that this works. So tell our audience what a metronome is.
It works with a lot of the children. It doesn't work 100% of the time. So I would say, like, we have all these tools in our toolbox, right? And we kind of grab the different tools and we try them all. And we try the one that works for that particular child. So the way that the metronome works is it feeds into the child's auditory system. So if the child is coming in and they're very high arousal and they're running around the room and climbing the poles, we put this little beat. The metronome is basically an auditory beat, and I'll put it on a speaker in the room, and I'll put it at a low beat with the attempt of trying to bring their arousal level down. And
it's like a rhythmic beat.
Just a rhythmic.
And you don't tell the child to concentrate on that. That's in the background of what you're doing, right?
I don't even mention that I'm putting it on. And it's interesting.
Right. That's awesome.
Some children won't even notice that it's on, and others will be very annoyed by it. So again, if they're annoyed by it, it's not going to work. Right. But if you put it on and they don't even notice it, it's incredible. Some children just respond to it, and it just immediately slows them down. So
it calms them?
It does. So I've used it I treat toe walking, habitual toe walking. These kids, a lot of them seem to have a very high arousal. And some of the activities we do, I need them to slow down, walk on a line or walk up a ramp and walk at a very slow pattern. And sometimes by just putting that metronome in the background, it slows them down immediately, and they can perform an activity in a slow paced way. And I can work on the strengthening of the muscles I'm trying to strengthen when we're doing it. So
and then it just becomes a habit. Like you use that over and over and over, so that then they're used to slowing down.
And I've had parents try to use it in their homes. Like I'll tell them to download the app and try it. Like they have periods of time in the day where they feel like little Johnny, as you called it, gets like crazy. Like after dinner, he starts bouncing off the walls or wrestling with his brother or, creating havoc around the house. And I'm like, put on the metronome. See if it works in your house. Like part of what we do isn't just doing it in the clinic. It's also trying to get parents to implement this at home and see if it really has nice carryover.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the other things you mentioned for ADHD is a sensory diet.
Yes.
Explain what a sensory diet is.
So a sensory diet is basically, it's not food. It is basically input. It's the same thing like the metronome, where you're trying to calm the child. So other than auditory ways of calming the child, like through a metronome, there's also tactile ways of calming a child. So we'll demonstrate a technique of just doing a massage, 10 strokes to every body part, starting with the arms, going down to the legs. We do compressions. We do different techniques to try to give input to the body as another way of calming them. Swinging, we have therapy swings here, is another way to calm the child. And
that's
then
sort of a rhythmic movement also.
For some children, swinging in a linear way is very calming. The other way you can move a child is rotary. Some children, believe it or not, calm from rotary, because you're feeding into the vestibular system, and if they have vestibular dysfunction, that can be calming. For other children, spinning just winds them up.
Yeah,
again, you have to try different things until you come up with a plan that works for that child. Jumping on a trampoline. For a child that's high energy, sometimes they just need to get the energy out, and that's calming. The idea of getting them, they're moving helps to calm them. So they get that energy out, and then they can focus on an activity. So a sensory diet is just finding out all of those things that would help the child and then implementing them throughout their day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned just before toe walking.
Yes.
That is another one of your major issues you face and deal with. I suppose it's exactly what it sounds like. Children are walking on their toes. Can you go further explain?
Yeah. So habitual toe walking is basically, it's a child who gets into the habit of toe walking. And just so your normal development is when a child is 18 months old, they start to walk with a heel toe gait, meaning they swing their leg out, they heel strike, they transfer their weight through their toe, and they push off.
Okay.
A child who toe walks starts walking on their tippy toes, and it's usually around the age of 2, I would say.
Do some parents see that and say, "Oh, that's so cute"?
They'll say, "Oh, they're on their toes," and a lot of times they'll even mention it to the pediatrician, and some pediatricians will say, "Oh, that's a normal phase of development." It's not.
Right.
It is not ever normal to toe walk.
Okay.
It is not a developmental phase.
I'm sure there's a parent out there right now who has a child who's toe walking.
And a lot of times, they'll outgrow it. Don't worry about it.
No,
they don't outgrow it.
Right.
Toe
You
walking,
even said to me you've been in a coffee shop
Like
and
a
seen an
Starbucks.
adult walking across toe walking.
in their 20s on their tippy toes.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it doesn't go away. And it's a really tough thing to treat. I've been treating it for years. It's a frustrating thing to treat, trying different things to get them to stop. But I now have something that I think is very, very beneficial.
Is it, Lisa? Is it a problem with sensory, with nerves? Something they don't like the feel of, or is it a muscular thing or a joint thing? What causes it?
So there's definitely different reasons why children toe walk. One reason a child might toe walk is because their body's very weak. So they have a lower muscle tone. We treat a lot of children with lower muscle tone or hypotonia.
They're just born that way?
Yep, it's just genetic. It's just the muscle tone is something that's genetic. Usually a parent also has lower tone. We'll hear from parents all the time, "Oh yeah, I used to sit, in this position, this W position," and they'll say things and you're like, "Oh, they also had hypotonia." It's usually very genetic. Or they'll say they always have knee pain or back pain. That's also really common for untreated hypotonia. But children who have hypotonia, they will lock their ankle joints. Locking your ankle joints.
I have hypotonia coming up next. We're talking is toe walking and hypotonia. I just want to stick more to toe walking.
Right. So toe walking, the reason why some kids toe walk is because they're weak. Let's just say that. They're weak. So in order for them to gain stability, they go up on their toes to lock their ankle joint. So that's one type of toe walker. Okay. The next type of toe walker has a sensory component. So the child either can't feel the floor underneath them, so they push up against the floor to get feedback from the floor. And that's more of a proprioceptive deficit, like they don't feel the floor underneath their feet. So they push into the floor and they might toe walk for that reason. And then
So how do you treat this?
So it's different. So this goes back to the whole, you have to treat the symptoms. You have to figure out why they're toe walking.
Right.
So we evaluate why they're toe walking. Some children, if you sit them on a bench on the floor, they're toe walkers. They will pull their feet underneath them and weight bear through their toes this way in a downward direction. Those are the kids that can't stand the feeling of the floor against their feet. So they retract from the floor. They're sensory avoiding the floor. Some kids will toe walk for that reason. So we know what little signs to look for to try to figure out why. But they all toe walk, and the toe walking treatment is the same pretty much across the board. So we implement a strengthening program because these children are weaker one side of their joint. So these kids only use certain muscles in their body, and the other muscles are underused and are extremely weak. So they don't use their abdominals, their core is very weak, they don't use their hip extensors, they don't use their dorsiflexors, which are the muscles in the front of the foot and the ankle. The plantar flexors are the ones that you go up on your tippy toes with. The ones on the other side never get used.
Yeah, I would think if you're walking consistently on your toes, you're creating all sorts of joint and muscle issues.
Yeah, and it's also extremely inefficient. I mean, think about how many steps you have to take on your tippy toes to equal one big, nice stride. So They have to walk really fast to go the same distance. So it's just really inefficient, and it really sets them up for a lot of problems, a lot of gross motor delays down the road. So you really want to break them of this habit as soon as possible.
All right. When I said, how do you treat them? One of the things you mentioned earlier to me in our pre-interview was you design a specific type of shoe for that child. Explain that, please.
Right. So I make shoe modifications And basically, the idea behind a shoe modification is that we reteach them how to walk.
Are you filling the heel area in, building up a heel so they have to have
on their toes, and you fill in the space, the air space, with a wedge. Gotcha. Because you really need them to make heel contact. Their heel has got to be down. So since they're not bringing their heel down to the ground, we have to bring the ground up to their heel.
Gotcha.
And as soon as they make that heel contact, immediately they start activating their hip extensors. I mean, you could just stand up now and shift your body weight over your heel, and all of a sudden you're going to feel, oh, I feel what muscles I'm activating. These kids never activate those muscles. So just putting them in a shoe modification changes everything. The other thing I do with the shoe modification is I put their existing shoe, inside a bigger shoe. When a child first learns to walk when they're 18 months old, the length of their tibia, which is the lower leg, is almost exactly the same length as their foot, if you can believe that. So because of that reason, an 18-month-old is very stable when they learn to walk. So we try to recreate a longer foot length by adding a bigger shoe. It's not going to be the same, but it's better than them walking on their regular shoe. And we retrain the body, we retrain them how to walk. And this walking program really relies on the parent being very involved. The parent really has to walk that child in those special shoes for 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And they have
for how long? For how many months? Or
it's different for every child, because it has to do with the fact, are you starting the program in the middle of the winter and there's snow outside? Like, you have to think about all the factors. I've had parents go to the mall, and walk around the mall. They have to walk outside. This is not, or inside of a big open space. You can't do this like on a treadmill. You have to be in an open space. So it depends on a lot of factors. Are the parents consistent? If the parents are consistent, you can start seeing major changes in the first 3 to 6 months. Plus, they come for therapy, and we're working on strengthening all those muscles that we talked about that are weak from toe walking.
I mean, I'm on my toes right now, and I feel my calf muscles are tightened. I assume that's about the only thing that gets a workout is their calf muscles, right?
So they're always up on their toes, and they also never bring that tibia forward over the foot. So when you come downstairs, think about it. Your tibia has to go forward over your foot, right? In order for you to come down a step. These kids can't come downstairs because they are so tight in that heel. So part of the toe walking program too is that you help to strengthen the muscle that lies beneath the plantar flexor, which is the soleus, and that muscle decelerates that tibia coming forward. So these are all the retraining muscles that happen from the toe walking program to get them back to where they need to be.
How are they getting downstairs? Bouncing down on their butt?
Sideways.
Oh yeah. All right.
They adapt because they can't bring the foot forward. But it's amazing. Over time, that's how we know they're making progress, because they can come down the stairs forward.
Great.
So
what's their reaction the first time they put that shoe on with the heel raised up? I mean, it's got to be foreign to them and uncomfortable. Do they squawk or?
Yeah, I mean, getting used to anything new is a little bit off. Like, I remember the first couple times they wear it. But, they're 3. It's like you just distract them. You sing a song, you walk, you tell a story, and they just get used to it. The feedback's been very good from parents. So it's the combination of the shoe modification and coming to therapy that can make a big change.
All right, I just want to reiterate before we go on to the next topic.
Right.
You don't outgrow toe walking. If you're a parent and your child is toe walking, get help immediately.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what your physical or your physician says, pediatric physician.
I think parents have to listen to themselves sometimes. I mean, parents know this is not going away. Parents come in and they are so frustrated. Do you know how many times a day I tell them to go up to their toes? It doesn't matter. No matter how many times you say it, they just can't do it. It's a habit. Right. So you have to not allow them to, or change their pattern by doing a shoe modification. That does not allow them to go up on their toes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You started to mention the next topic I broke down during the toe walking, and that is hypotonia and postural weakness.
Right.
What is hypotonia exactly?
So hypotonia is basically just a lower muscle tone throughout the body. The body.
And again, they're born with low. They're born with poor muscle tone.
Born this way, and these are the children that are typically W sitters. They're so low tone. They sit in this W position. It's extreme internal rotation of their hips.
And you said that stretches their ligaments out also, right? Which is
stretches out the ligaments in their knees and also in their hips. It can also create an in-toe gait. So the kids who walk in-toed, sometimes that's created from W sitting. It's a position that children adopt because they don't have to utilize any muscles, and it creates a very wide base of support for them when they're sitting on the floor. So these are the kids that have balance problems. They have core weaknesses in their trunk, and they wind up sitting in this position, which really is a very bad thing for them. So we try to teach them, to choose a better way to sit. There are other sitting options, crisscross applesauce, sit them in a little chair at a table. Just try to avoid W sitting when you can.
I guarantee you there's a parent listening right now and their child sits in the W position. And that is when they're sort of like on their thighs almost and their ankles are out. That's the position.
It looks like a W.
Right. And that is a big no-no, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, I have a picture of it. Do you want me to show it?
If you have one, sure. Hold it up.
I can hold it up. It's like a little cartoon picture.
Yeah.
Can you see it?
At the bottom. Yep.
That's what it looks like. So that is the other thing that happens when a child is sitting that way is they get excessive movement in one part of their joint.
Okay, you can take that.
But they have excessive movement in one part of their joint. And then when you ask them to sit crisscross applesauce, they can't get their legs in that position because the capsule has gotten so tight from being completely internally rotated in their hips that when they try to externally rotate their hips and sit in crisscross applesauce, they actually can't do it. So they lose range of motion in their joints from only sitting in that position. So it's really important to get that changed early.
Yeah, exactly.
So the other thing you asked me about was the postural weakness.
Right.
So these are the kids also like gravity just pulls them down, right? So these are the kids that kind of have the rounded spine. They kind of sit very slumped. Mm-hmm. They don't really have good trunk extensors, good postural control. A lot of times for them, we'll suggest to parents that they have them sit on a wedge, which is higher in the back and narrower in the front. So it creates a better position of their pelvis. And then we have them make sure their child is sitting there when they're doing their homework, just to create more extension through the spine. So we change their position as well as strengthen their bodies. It's important to do both things because we only have them for 45 minutes, maybe a couple times a week. But the rest of the time, they need to have their body in a better posture. Right. So we try to really do a lot of parent education and carry over at home. So those are the kids, they fatigue quickly. Those are the kids who have a really hard time keeping up with their peers, the school-age children. They're the kids who opt out of playground activities during recess because they just don't feel like they can keep up with their peers. They opt out of sports at their school because they just feel like they're always coming in last. They don't have the speed. They don't have the endurance. They don't have that motor power. But again, like hypotonia, if you treat it at a very young age, I'm saying preschool age, by then, by the time they get to grade school, you've made so many gains and then they can join with their peers and they don't have to feel like they can't keep up. And that's when you were talking about that psychological impact.
Yeah, these are the kids that are avoiding athletics, avoiding activity. So now they're isolating themselves.
And their self-esteem, like a lot of these kids come in and they just don't believe they can do anything. And part of our job not only is making their body strong, but it's also making them believe that they can do these things, that now they can, jump rope, or they can participate in sports and they can play basketball. And then they start to believe that they can do these things. They start going out of their comfort zone. And that's, when I get a call from a family and they're like, we went to Vermont and last year, our son wasn't able to keep up with us and he had to take 1 million breaks. And now he's hanging out with our family. He's able to spend the whole day. So this is like, you want to change the function, and then, they can their whole lifestyle can change. So the earlier you do this, the better it is for the child.
You brought up the story of a 12-year-old girl who hadn't even learned to ride a bike yet.
Right. Yeah.
I think my father at 5 or 6, maybe even 4, put me on a bike to teach me. And so this is the example. So they're delayed in all their activities because of this.
Right. And like we get children at all ages with hypotonia, we get children who are 3, who are toddlers with hypotonia. We get children who are grade school age. And that's usually when I hear from parents like, my son is opting out of activities at school. He doesn't want to be active. And then we get teenagers where the parent is like, they're on their phone all day. They're in their room. They don't want to participate. They're not active. And those kids, we talked about high arousal, right? Like the toe walkers or the ADHD kids that are bouncing off the walls. These kids are actually the polar opposite. Their arousal state is low. So part of our job is to get that higher, right? Get their arousal higher, get them active, get them doing things. And then they start really enjoying movement. Those kids, you have to get them higher. And one of the things I do with those kids is I put on music in the background when we do therapy. As we're exercising on the balls, we use therapy balls. We try to make it really fun for the kids.
What does the music do, Lisa?
Well, it's like I'll have someone come in and say to them, whether they're 5, tell me what your favorite songs are. We will make a playlist for them. We put on their favorite music. While we're doing exercises, we'll exercise to the music. If we have a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, we'll put their favorite playlist on. And already their mood is elevated. And then they want to participate. So that's that auditory piece, that feeds into the central nervous system. When we work out, it's always great to listen to music. It keeps us going. We tap into all those types of things to motivate children. And then we want to see, like this child that we were just talking about, she was like, she couldn't ride a bike. We put her on a Peloton program. We have a Peloton. We started getting her to bike, believing she could bike. And now she bikes with her dad every weekend. And it's become something that she can do with her dad, something she could never do before. So when you see real functional changes in the child's life, wow, I've made an impact. And this is going to carry with them through adulthood, we hope, right?
Yeah. Awesome. There's also like guidelines for when a child should be able to roll themselves over, or for when they should start crawling, or when they should start walking. And there's children who have delays in those areas you treat as well, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So quite often we get children that come in and they're anywhere from 9 to 11 months. And I mean, at 11 months, you really should be independently crawling and pulling up to standing. And these kids can't sit, or they're just starting to sit and they can't get from sitting to their tummies, or they can't get from their tummies to sitting. We call that transitional movement. And they won't even put their hands down on the surface. So they just don't even know how to work their bodies. And we really teach them to crawl. I mean, such an interesting story that just happened fairly recently because of COVID, is we got a case. It was a child that was just at a year and he could not move. And the parents relocated because they were living in a condo complex in Westchester. And there was a lot of, there was one laundry and they just felt really uncomfortable. So they left and went to Massachusetts, and their child needed therapy. And I thought to myself, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to teach a baby to crawl through a computer, through telehealth? Impossible. Never done it before. I was able to teach these parents on telehealth exercises to do each day. And between me and the parents, we actually taught this child to crawl, just
Awesome.
with virtual therapy. And
How quickly?
Yeah.
How quickly from the time you began?
It was about 2 months, but he was transitioning. This was a child who could not roll. Like, you put him on his back, he couldn't roll to his stomach. So we taught him how to roll. We taught him how to transition from his stomach back to sitting. I would use a little doll, and show them what to do with their child. And it's hard because parents don't know where to put their hands and what to do. We do it. We know because we've been doing this. I've been doing this for 25 years, but they don't know how to do it. So I just wasn't sure if I could teach them. And it was incredible. We got it done. And he learned how to transition, and he learned how to crawl. And he's still behind. You're not going to go from 12 months not being able to roll or crawl to now he's 13, 14 months and he can walk. Like, everything is a building block. So you have to realize, like, a child should crawl for 3 months. If they're 12 months and they're not crawling yet, don't expect them to walk till they're over 15 months. So that's why, again, so important to start this when they're young. Independent sitting is 6-7 months. If your child's not sitting up on their own 6-7 months, something should be going off in your head. Something's not right here. And you should absolutely see a pediatric physical therapist. There's absolutely no harm in seeing one. It's completely non-invasive. But just get educated and learn about the developmental milestones, what to look for, what to expect in the next phase of development, because everything builds. So if you miss this whole step, you still have to fill that foundation before they can move forward.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the next topic I had jotted down that you treat, and that is torticollis. And
The big one.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people like myself who don't know the layman term for that. So explain what torticollis is.
Torticollis is an orthopedic disorder where a baby is born with their head tilted. So they're either tilted to the right or
like
their
this?
head is on a tilt. Right.
Okay.
It could be caused by the position in utero. Sometimes the baby's very large and the mom's uterus is small. The baby gets crunched.
Got cramped in there?
They get cramped in there or wedged under the pelvis. Sometimes there could be what's called like a fibrous tumor. It's not cancerous. It's just a bulge in the sternocleidomastoid muscle. It usually disappears by the time the child is 3 months old. So sometimes if we don't get a child very early, we get 4 or 5 months, it could be gone already. But it causes the child to keep their head tilted to one side. And then if you think about it, if you're tilted to one side and you're laying on your back, you're going to develop a flat spot on the back of your head. It's called plagiocephaly. So usually the two come together, torticollis and plagiocephaly. So we need to get those kids, we need to first get full range of motion in the neck, because we've got to get them moving. We use massage, passive range of motion. We teach parents ways to hold their child, to stretch out the muscle. If a child is tilted to one side, say they're tilted to the right, they also then look to the opposite side, because the muscle side bends and then rotates. So they have like a twisted look to their head. So because they side bend to one side and look to the other, they actually never look to the opposite side. So part of our job is to get them to make sure that they can turn their heads to both sides. And that's really important. If you don't get that going, the baby actually develops strength on one side more than the other. Babies develop based on their visual field. So if a child is looking to the left, they see their left hand. There's a toy over their head. They're going to reach for that toy with their left hand. They'll never reach with the right hand unless they look to the right. So you could see how the asymmetry starts pretty early. So you need to kind of nip that in the bud pretty soon and make sure they're turning to both sides, using both arms to reach, and so on and so forth. It's very, very important.
Awesome. Yeah, I could see, like, if you're tilted, I mean, I know when I sleep wrong and I get a stiff neck,
Right.
my whole system is out of whack.
Right, exactly.
Let alone, and how do you treat the flat spot?
So I don't treat basically so these are the kids like might not do a lot of tummy time. Tummy time is really important. And I think parents are afraid sometimes to put their children on their stomachs. The back to sleep program, which is like the SIDS scare.
Right.
Parents here, don't put your child on their stomach, to sleep. And they think, don't put your child on their stomach, period. No, you have to put your child on their stomachs throughout the day, even when they're very, very little. It's how a baby develops head control and trunk control and strengthening. And it's also when they start to push with their hands off of a surface, right? Those things are really important for rolling and for pivoting and prone, which is developmental. So we have to get them on their tummies, really important. Child with plagiocephaly, their best friend is their stomach. Because when you're not weighted on your head,
right,
you're not getting that pressure. So getting them out of those carriers, getting them onto their stomach helps. But if it's a very flat spot, they have places that make cranial bands. It's kind of
cranial what? Bands?
Oh, cranial bands.
Right.
So it's like if you've ever seen that baby in the supermarket that has like a plastic thing on their head. It almost, it looks like a helmet.
Right.
That is to make the plagiocephaly go away, improve the plagiocephaly. And for the kids that are pretty moderately impaired, or severely flat, I would recommend those. There hasn't been a lot of research with the milder kids, if it makes all that much of a difference. But through my practice, I have seen children with moderate to severe plagiocephaly that have been greatly helped. Your bones in your skull are moldable up until about 14 months. Okay. So you have a window of opportune time to do the band. And if you miss that window.
So are you then stuck with a flat spot for the rest of your life?
And not only a flat spot, but, really severe torticollis can cause facial asymmetry. So like one side of your face, one cheek could be flatter, one eye could be smaller.
Would it look almost like a baby had a stroke, sort of?
You could. I've seen really severe cases where it does look a little bit like that.
Wow.
The eye height could be off. The ear heights could be off with their ears. Like it could really cause a lot of facial deformity. So so you've got your skull, right? The bones that are soft, but they're attached to your facial bones. So I do believe that by correcting the cranial bones, you do have an impact on facial bones as well, because it's all connected when they're soft. And we've had kids come in not properly treated for plagiocephaly, and they can't get glasses to sit straight on their face. They literally, their glasses look like this because their ear height's off. That's a severe case, but it's a severe case that could have been avoided.
Right.
Had they gotten that band. So that's an important piece of treatment of torticollis, is really assessing the plagiocephaly and treating that as well. It has to be, together. And we advise people that come through the practice, and we put them in touch with people if we think that that's a good idea for their child.
So again, this is early on, like
early.
They're born with the crooked head.
Right.
And you can begin treating 2 months into it, right?
Right. 7 weeks, 8 weeks. And again, the earlier, the better, because the muscles are soft. They're easier to mold when they're younger. Head control is just developing, so they haven't developed a lot of that asymmetry yet. So we're really catching them early, and we can avoid a lot of those things from happening. We have gotten babies with torticollis 9 months. It's a lot tougher to treat at 9 months than it is at 2 months. The muscles are tighter. It's more uncomfortable to stretch out those muscles for those babies. It's more painful. So avoidance in this case is not helping your child, because it's going to cause them more pain to come in at 9 months and have to get their neck stretched out.
At what age should a child start walking? What's the normal?
So it's from 12 to 14 months. Okay. People say baby should walk at a year. I find it's closer to 13, 14 months, typical walking.
In that 12 to 15 month, they learn to start walking.
12 to 14 months, I would say.
Do you see a toe walker start right from the from the rip on their toes, or is that something like
I
2,
do
3
want
years
to.
in?
I do want to say one thing.
Yeah.
There are certain devices which we highly discourage parents from using. They are walkers. They are literally, you put your child in these things and they've got wheels, and they push them and they walk. They actually kind of promote toe walking. So do not before your child is walking, do not put them in these walkers. They've actually been banned in England.
Oh, really?
But they are parents still in the United States using them, and they're really, really bad for children that are not walking.
They're probably nervous about their child falling, and I mean,
Right.
you gotta let them rock and roll, right?
But they're not walking yet, so they figure if they put them in these walkers, they'll at least start walking. But they're developing horrible walking habits, and your child's not walking for a reason. Children should walk by a certain age. If they're not, something's going on, and then needs to be addressed. We have to figure out why they're not walking. And again, a lot of the times these foundation skills are not developed. The strength piece is not developed.
All right, let's just cover this again.
Sure.
At what age should a child be able to roll themselves over?
So anywhere from 3 to 5 months.
Okay, so
Stomach to back first, back to stomach second.
all right, so if I'm a parent, child 6 months old,
Can't
that's
roll.
not happening yet, they need to contact you.
Absolutely.
At what age is the crawling beginning?
I would say crawling really, it starts anywhere from 7, 8 months to 10 months. So we really want to see a crawl, like independent sitting starts as a child can sit from 6 to 7 months. By 7 months, they should start reaching outside of that base of support and start transitioning. From transitioning, they get into quadruped, hands and knees, and start to crawl. So I would say 7, 8 months, they should be crawling.
So, all right, again, parent with a newborn, 10 to 12 months, not crawling yet, we got a problem, got to contact you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
10
And
months,
then,
going up to standing.
what's that?
Once the baby starts to crawl, he's going to crawl, or he or she is going to crawl over to something, put their hands up, and get up to standing. So transition from crawling to standing happens at around 10 months old, and then they start to cruise, right? Along the couch. They start taking those little side steps back and forth. Usually by 10, 11 months, they should be pulling up to standing, cruising. That gets them ready for walking.
Okay. And then walking again, you said was what? 12 to 15?
14.
12 to 14?
Yeah.
So my baby's 18 months old, not walking yet.
It's a problem.
We got a problem.
Yeah.
All right. So I think parents need to hear this. They need to all right, my child's not outgrowing this. There's an issue.
Just don't be afraid to listen to that voice inside of you. I think a lot of parents hear it and they're like, they'll be okay. I think another really important fact too is I think parents who have other siblings in the house or a big giant dog, they tend to not put those little babies on the floor because they're afraid they're going to get trampled on, right? Environmental restraints can cause delays.
Gotcha.
So I get why parents do it, but I would say find a quiet place where the other siblings are not running all over the place and spend time with your baby with them playing on their stomach. Because I get why parents do that. They're trying to keep their babies safe, but they're not allowing babies develop through being on the floor, right? And being on their stomachs. That's how they develop. You have to put them in that environment to let those things happen. So we do see that a lot. Third sibling, 2 rambunctious brothers. The mom's afraid their child's going to get killed by being on the floor. So just try to create a safe space so you can have that time with the baby.
I mean, how quickly can you tell a child is on the spectrum or has spectrum disorder? At what age can you notice that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really hard thing to determine. You can start to see there are some problems with sensory, right? They don't want to put their hands down. Maybe they don't like to be touched. Maybe they don't respond to you in the way you want them to. Maybe they don't make eye contact. There are signs, But
Okay.
not everything leads to autism.
Right.
Sometimes it could just be a processing disorder. It doesn't mean it's autism. It just might mean that they process information differently. I think autism doesn't get diagnosed until they're closer to like 3, I want to say. So we don't know, and we never want to label until we really know. We just want to treat what we see and help that child in any way we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So kids on the spectrum, you can help. ADHD,
Yeah.
you can help. Autism, you can help.
Yeah.
Toe walking, you can help.
Yep.
Torticollis with the crooked neck or a flat spot. Let's get help going. Delay in rolling over, delay in crawling, delay in walking. Let's get them to you.
Absolutely.
And then the problems with muscle tone weakness, hypotonia.
Right. That's
your child. It's going to lead your child to isolate themselves later as they get older and older. It's going to create emotional and psychological problems, right?
Self-esteem. We find these kids have very poor self-esteem. So important to build them up when they're young and show them the great thing about hypotonia, it's so treatable. As long as you tell those kids how to strengthen their bodies and you work with them, they can do these things that they didn't think that they could do. They just need that extra help to strengthen their bodies. It just doesn't happen so naturally for them. They don't use their entire body when they move. They just use one joint at a time. So we also teach them these strategies, like when they're jumping, use your arms to propel your body, right?
It almost creates a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're avoiding all these activities and just compounding that issue, making it worse.
Right? From the inactivity. So it's like, you have to stop that chain. You have to show them that they can accomplish these things. They can be strong. And then you want them to reach outside of that comfort zone and try activities that they probably never normally would try. So, and once they start realizing and they start believing in themselves, there's just no limit to what they could do. So I think it's so important to get these kids in early, get their self-esteem up, get their strength up, and then, they won't need long-term PT. We'll get it fixed early and they'll just continue with their lives.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I found it all fascinating. I loved it.
I'm so glad.
I appreciate it. Somebody rattles the word torticollis to me, I'm gonna be crooked neck. I know what that is. This was great. So I heard you mention telehealth.
Oh yeah.
So when the pandemic hit, is that how you had to manage your practice, by doing telehealth online, Zoom with children?
Yeah, I mean, we shut down for about 2 months, and we were only doing telehealth for 2 months. And it was challenging. It really challenged all of our skills. I have 3 other physical therapists that work here. Mm-hmm. And everyone was kind of doing it. And we would have our props. We would teach the parents what to do. We had to be super creative. I mean, it's hard enough, to motivate a child to keep them interested when you have them in front of you. But trying to engage them when they're on a screen is tough. You have to be really creative to do that. The babies I found were a little easier because you've got the parents there in the space and you were able to show the parents what to do. The 4 or 5-year-olds were a little bit of a challenge. You had to be pretty creative to keep their interest. But still, we managed to do it. We managed to help a lot of kids, even with the virtual situation. We made it work.
So, I'm a parent in Alaska watching this. I'm in England or Australia. Mm-hmm. They can reach out to you. You can set up online sessions through their insurance company, right?
Absolutely. We work with a lot of insurance companies. I work really hard to try to get coverage for families with their insurance plans. And a lot of insurance plans, the major ones, are also accepting telehealth for physical therapists right now. So we are happy to reach out to anyone, anywhere, and give them advice and help them and guide them and look into their insurance situation. We're here to help children.
The name of your practice is Play and Grow?
Play and Grow Physical Therapy. And
Physical Therapy, and you're in Ardsley, New York, which is Westchester County?
Exactly. Yeah.
So people can just Google Play and Grow Westchester County, New York.
Yeah. And they can find me, and please reach out to me. I'm here to help you and your child in any way that we can. I'm so thankful that you had me on today, Clark, because I think this is so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think this fits in perfectly to what we're doing here during this 5 weeks. It fits in perfectly to the Kiwanis message of helping children one child at a time. It fits in perfectly to my motto of breaking the silence and doing away with the stigma and the shame.
Right.
And you need to treat children as early as possible, no matter what the problem is.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, you're doing that, and it's fantastic.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank you for coming on, and I want to thank you for what you chose as a career. It's awesome.
Thank you. I love it. I've always been so happy doing it. It's a wonderful.
It has to be rewarding.
It is. I love it. And it's wonderful to be able to change the course of somebody's life. And like you were saying with what you're trying to promote as well, like to get people help early, that the rest of their life, can be fulfilling. It's the same thing with what I do. It's like trying to get them to appreciate life and be able to interact in the world. It's just a physical interaction.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye. All right, folks. I hope you liked it. I loved it. I love the topic, and I love learning new stuff, and I love educating parents who may have a child that has any one of those symptoms and thinks they're going to outgrow it. No. Get help immediately. Next week is episode 5, and it's our last segment. And my life, I have countless people tell me that I'm an inspiration to them because of all that I've overcome in my life. And I wanted to close out the 5-week segment by inspiring everyone. And instead of using my own life as the inspiration, I'm going to have on a male and a female whose life has been down in the dumps like mine was, and they've been able to turn things around to have a great life. The female you will hear was caught up in human trafficking. The male I'm going to have on was abused by a family member. Both fell into drug addiction. Both fell into jail. And both have turned their life around. And between the three of our stories, if you don't come away from that feeling inspired, feeling that no matter what you're facing, you can overcome it, you have to. You're going to hear 2 stories of hell, and yet people have found their way out of hell. And I want them to share that with you so you can all learn something. So next week's going to be awesome. It's going to be intense. And I urge everyone to tune in. I just want to thank you again and thank Kiwanis. And if you can, please donate so we can raise as much money for the Kiwanis Club. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you next week.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again for joining us for tonight's episode of Breaking the Silence. We'll be back next week, Thursday at 7 o'clock, same time. We hope that you have found tonight's program informative. I still can't get over some of the things I've heard from Lisa. And you just walk away from a lot of this stuff with a better view of what you can do for your children, what we can do for our children. Remember, if you can, make a donation to Clifton Kiwanis. You can go to www.greatergoodmediallc.com, clarkfredericks.com, and or cliftonkiwanis.org. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week on Breaking the Silence.
We'd like to thank our sponsors, Hack and Rose, Attorneys at Law, New York City. New Pathway Counseling Services, Pine Brook, New Jersey. Warren Sand Company, Springfield, Illinois. Shook Funeral Home, Clifton, New Jersey. MedScreen Laboratories, Clifton, New Jersey. Standard Tile of East Hanover. Hayek's Hometown Market in Newton, New Jersey. And thanks to the many other sponsors listed here.